I just like helping people in any capacity I can, and nothing good is going to come out of anything if people just are bystanders and don't actually volunteer for things, and then that always leads into something, and you're with Fearless Women, and it sort of leads into other relationships and things, and it just, you can broaden your horizons so much. So I just love helping. I'm just a bit of a nerd in that respect. I like putting my hand up and saying, I'll help out, because I think that just affects change and just helps other people to do sort of similar, I suppose. I would say it's definitely from my parents, that always telling me to take part in opportunities when they come up, or even seek out opportunities. And they were very much, you have to work, the second you're legally allowed to work, you need to work and get maturity and responsibility. And so that was a big thing for us. We were a very community-minded family as well. And so I think I just like being of assistance to people to make their lives easier. Yeah, growing up, definitely. He wasn't around a lot because he lived in Darwin. My parents split when I was 7, and we lived in South Australia in Victor Harbour. And, but he was always such the lines of communication were always open. He always came and stayed with us for holidays, and he was a very big part of our life. And then also just my grandparents on my mother's side, because they were around with us when we were kids as well. And there was just this... just these values instilled in us, that just be a good human and just do the right thing, and respect people in positions of authority. And then that changed a bit when we're getting older. Authority that deserve it, that are just because you're in a position of authority doesn't mean that you are a good person.
So they taught you to question that as well,
yes, very much. Question status quo, and don't be too rebellious. Don't be just happy to go along and go with the flow. Just which I think is such a good value to have. Just not the person that just asks questions constantly and to be a bit of a nuisance. I was actually just in a meeting then, and there's people. It's like, I don't think this really concerns the greater organisation. So that's always interesting too, to sort of see those sorts of interactions. So dad's side of the family is Torres Strait Islander. They're from Mile Island, and so we didn't have a lot to do with them. Definitely growing up when we were in Darwin, we did. But then, and I was sort of saying that to Brooke last time. It was kind of like, it was just sort of like our second life, the Indigenous part of our family. It was interesting, and it wasn't a huge issue for us. It was just sort of, that's who we are, that's great. So we weren't overly culturally, we weren't a really, how do I say that? I've got sieve brain at the end of the day. But it just wasn't, we weren't very involved in the Indigenous sort of side of our family, I suppose. So, and then anyway, grew up, I've got 2 older sisters and an older brother, and Mum always worked so many jobs because she was such a great provider. And we've always had our grandparents around on Mum's side. And grew up in South Australia and was heavily involved in sports and surf lifesaving. I loved surf lifesaving. It was so good. So always in athletics and tennis and netball, and so always playing some form of sport or doing something active. And just my brother and I were just rat bags, always just out in our little town, because it was such a beautiful coastal town. Victor Harbour is a lovely place to grow up, and so it was one of those. And back then it was really safe. You could just do whatever you want until the street lights came on. We worked on that kind of rule, I guess. And
A bit like home and away.
yeah, pretty much. We knew everyone. Mum's a nurse in town at the local clinic, so she knew everyone. And so it was very, our house was such a drop-in centre. It was so nice because everyone, my sister's friends and everything used to come over. So that was really great. Really great, fun childhood. And then I went to boarding school in Adelaide, just to sort of, in Mum's view, it was to help me sort of be a bit more academic and maybe go to uni, but I just played a lot of sport, and living away from home was so much fun, and I really enjoyed that. And then just sort of moved up to Townsville after school because my mum and sister bought a Dimmock's bookshop. And,
oh, wow.
so I worked in there a little bit, but then I sort of focused on coaching swimming and working in hospitality, and then I joined the Queensland Police in 2005. I went through an Indigenous traineeship. That's how I entered the police. It was called the Justice Entry Program. They offered it to Indigenous people as a way, instead of doing the study, you did the diploma while you were at the police college. So it was really good, and it gave us that extra 6 months of building these networks within the police, and then we just went into the regular recruit course afterwards. So it was so we were kind of the old hands, I guess, when it came to all the other recruits joining, and it was a really good way to be because I already knew how a lot of stuff worked in the computer systems and things like that. So I found that to be very helpful, and that was good. And I definitely wanted an outdoorsy type of job. I was not an academic. I wasn't going to study, and I just knew I didn't want to be in an office. And so I thought, wow. Saw the ad in the paper and just thought, this is a great thing to do. And I'd always held police in such high regard, and I was almost revered, just not afraid, but just that real respect of, wow, they're doing the law and order, but keeping people safe. And I've always had this, I've always wanted to help people. At school, I was always the protector, and I always stood up for people, and that continued into work. It hasn't worked out well some of the time, but I think as you get older, it does tend to sort of help you.
Yeah.
And just to know right from wrong, and just go, actually, that is not a very good standard to keep or to portray to your staff. So, so it was just that whole thing of, your work can pretty much take you anywhere, or you're not restricted to an office. And I tell you what, it was the best decision of my life. It was so great. It was just, and then I was out in, I chose to go out to Mount Isa because, they only wanted like 3 or 4 people to go out, and they really had to convince people, where I was just like, oh my God, this is going to be the best. And it was massive. Like, it was a huge culture shock. As in, I was used to the outback and that sort of thing, but just being in that consistent 40-degree heat every day, it was just working out, like, the mine is the centre of the town, and it's just so weird that you just driving around town and there's just giant mining trucks everywhere and everything. But it was just that I had this feeling that I needed to, and it's not help, but I just wanted to make a difference, I suppose, in people's lives. And I thought, well, why not, focus on where there is lots of concentrated Indigenous people, and just try and challenge some ideas that were going on, and just racism and things like that, and just the views held. I mean, they were a little bit. I find Queensland Police was it was such a respectful organisation. So it was very interesting. It has a really bad reputation in some respects, and the media doesn't help anything. And but it was very, very rewarding work. It was interesting because looking at me you don't think I'm Indigenous at all. It's just, so it was, and I never walked around just going, hey, what of you, you know, or anything like that. Like, but yeah, I think it was just giving people the time of day and actually just taking the time, looking at how my colleagues interacted and going, oh, you know, that could have gone better or whichever. And I'm sure they looked at me and said the same thing as well. And I just think sometimes, I think giving people your time is really important, and just letting people know that you're not just another number, or you're not just another job for them for that day. It's hard. Like, you might have gone to a fatal car accident and then the next minute you're at old Doris's house because, you know, someone's trampled her plants, or there's music's too loud next door, and you have to just switch gears back into like this, like you haven't just sort of handled a dead body or something, and it's like, oh yes, your flowers are trampled. For her, that could be the most serious thing that happens to her. So it's, you know, you've just had to have that sort of. But yeah, the locals were great. I liked it. I've got some great photos of jobs, and it was a very positive experience. I mean, it wasn't all great. The racial tensions in town were really difficult because you've got a mining town where it's a lot of white blokes who are hard and that's their job, and it is tough work. And then, you know, there's another side of it where there are a lot of Indigenous people in the mines, and they do some great traineeships and everything, and there's some really good government programs, but then there's also a large majority of people that don't want to work, and then that's quite difficult, especially for those that are working and their family members aren't working, and they're kind of getting tarred with the same brush, and it can be quite difficult. But yeah.
Sounds complex.
It's really complex. Yes, that's the word.
So how long were you there for?
I was in the district for 8 years.
Wow.
So I went over to Mornington Island for 2 years, and that's a Indigenous community. It was a dry community. You wouldn't know it though because there was a lot of issues. Alcohol smuggling was a huge thing because it's island. People would bring boats over filled with alcohol, and you know when that would happen because the town would erupt. And I mean, there's things like we had to lock up the yeast every night for the baker in the police station because they were going to make homebrew out of yeast.
Wow.
And we had opal fuels because of the youth. There was a huge issue with sniffing and chroming and things like that. So all that, you know, you think you're just going to Woolies to buy some deodorant or something, but you can't, and you can't buy razor blades, and so it's just a whole different lifestyle. But I loved in the communities going to the schools, and I used to sit there with the kids and go to the classroom and hang out. And we had a program, you became an adopt-a-cop, so the school would adopt a cop. And it was really great. And that was just, I probably should have been a teacher or something because I just love that stuff. And I think there was just so much fun just being able to show the kids that we're not just there to lock up their family members or anything. We're there to help and we're there to listen. And there was one girl in particular, and she was so fabulous, and she went off to James Cook Uni and did her nursing, and she was just so great, and she was one that I spent a lot of time with, and just letting them know that they have options and that they're special and that they're individuals, they're not just one big group. And it's letting people know that yes, they're valued as that singular human. I've got people that have done that for me, and it's just sometimes I need a lot of pats on the back in life, I think, sometimes, because I think I've worked in such a thankless job, and I think it's really nice to sort of give people the time to make yourself available for them, and if you don't have capacity, you can just say to them, I can come and see you some other time, and give them options. But I love just letting people know that they've got so much potential and there's so many possibilities. You don't have to just enter one line of work and then that's it. We're so past those days now. It gets so exciting.
Yeah.
And I think COVID really helped that as well, to let us know that you can do anything and you can work from any location, really. I worked in a town called Dajara, and it's 180 kilometres south of Mount Isa. And it was just a small little 2-person station. And yeah, because you're the only 2 police in town, I had this wonderful boss, John. He was just so nice. It was just like working with your best mate who just happens to be an older guy who's just so lovely. And the fact that he was also just so invested in the community policing and the outback as well. And I've still followed his career, and he's still, I think he's in Ngunnawal now, and they're doing some great things there. I think they were recently on Australian Story. So good. So, yes, my dad, I was having some issues in town, just getting people to sort of warm up, because the previous police weren't great, and we had a lot of mending to do, and we really had to work on our relationships. And so Dad came to town and visited me, and I went off to work one day, and we were out of town at another one of the mine sites, I think, because we covered 3 mines as well. And I got back, and he's down the road at one of the locals' house, just having a chat to them at the fence, and he just talked with his hair so big, and speaking language with them and everything, and then the word just spread like wildfire that I was Indigenous. My dad's Ray Morrison, and he worked here and did this and everything, and the attitude just switched. It was so incredible, and just this, like, they actually took the time to go, oh wow, she's not actually just this same old cop that's going to come and make our lives hard. And I was just, man, it just took him one afternoon. He had just done so much for me. So
built up your cred.
Just got me the street cred. It was so good. And he passed 2 years ago, and it was just such a loss, because he's just the most magnificent person and just so personable. He would just give anyone his time and just tell the most, and he was an amazing storyteller, and none of us kids really got that gene, I don't think. And it's just, you know how you have, God, there's some people that can just tell a really good story and an anecdote, but so that was a really special time. He made that a very enjoyable posting for me, so yeah. I then went back to Mount Isa and became a training officer for the district, so training all the first-year constables that would come out and just running training courses for the station. Then I saw AFP were advertising for lateral recruits, so because it's such a young workforce here and they just don't get the numbers, they get heaps of applicants, but they just lack the experience, I suppose. So they do lateral recruit courses with other jurisdictions. So I was accepted in 2013 to AFP. And
what attracted you to the AFP?
I was really sick of the heat, and I just wanted to get into the cold weather.
Makes sense.
And I was of the opinion, like, the AFP being the premier law enforcement agency, and I thought, wow, this is a place I can really bring some great experiences and also get some great opportunities and working roles that I might not have done with Queensland Police. So it started off with a lot of promise, and it was really good to start with. We all thought we were going to national offices. I thought I was going to go to Melbourne, but then halfway through the course they said 10 of you have to stay here, you can decide, and then they left the room. And so there's 20 of us sitting in a room, and we're just like, what are we going to do? And there's people with families and kids and everything. That should have been a sign, if anything. But anyway, and I just put my hand up and said, look, I'm the single one here with no kids, and I'm happy. I'll stay in Canberra. My dad used to live here, so I sort of knew it a little bit. I was happy to stay. And then they put us in general duties policing, which is what we'd all pretty much sort of left our jobs. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to be federal agents. And anyway, it was fine, and it worked out really well. And I was with a great team, and the people from my course. There was still a few of us local, and most of the really great ones stayed. So that was good. But then it sort of became evident that they called us mudbloods because we weren't the blue blood AFP, and laterals were treated a lot differently. So, and I won't focus on the negatives too much, but not a lot of opportunity as they sort of sold us. They didn't honour a lot of our experience, even though they said they would. And I didn't come in expecting to be promoted straight away, but I would have thought with my experience I would have at least been given some opportunities. But it was just, and it was across the board. And then I linked in with some other laterals and they were sort of told the same stories as well. So I was like, oh, okay, so it's not just us. And it was just the attitude. So, but you just challenge that thinking, I suppose. And I ended up in some great positions after I was in general duties. I went to the AOC, which is now called the NOSC, and it's just the national sort of, it's the centre for everything, and it's over at EBB. It's open 24 hours, and it's just where everything comes in after hours. So kidnappings overseas, bombings, war. Oh my God, I can imagine at the moment.
Busy.
It would be hardcore. And so that was such a great exposure to how the organisation actually works, and that's considered a national posting. And it was just incredible. So, because they have outcome 1 and outcome 2, and one's national, one's local. Because anyone could have the contract for policing here. I mean, Western Australia could be the police here if they wanted to. It's just whoever wins the contract, just AFP just seems to re-win it every time. And so after that, I went to search and rescue, and that was incredible. That was really fun, just being in that role and spending your days hiking in the national parks and rescuing people and, winching out of choppers and all this great training and doing roping. And but unfortunately the management wasn't great, and so I became quite unwell. I ended up with PTSD, and at the time it was terrible. It was like my life was ending, because that was my dream job and my career, and the attitude towards mental health was terrible, outdated, so much stigma attached to it. Whereas I was quite happy to say to people, this has happened to me, it really sucks, but hey, how can we change things? And I mean, as a result of me being unwell and then going to a new area, I took a decent amount of time off work to get better as well, and Comcare covered everything. So in that respect, I was really lucky, because there's people out there, I mean, gosh, how much psychiatrists and psychologists cost, and people don't have access to these. It's terrible. So, and Comcare is quite difficult to navigate. That sounded very diplomatic.
I think that's pretty factual, maybe.
It's a very interesting government department to navigate when you're unwell, and it becomes really hard. And anyway, after that, they attached psychologists to the specialist areas. They actually did debriefs after major jobs, which was really good, because they weren't doing them consistently at all. And I mean, you're going to some pretty horrific scenes, and a lot of the work in search and rescue was body recovery, and also shield, like when you see there's an accident or something and all the fences are up and stuff, we would come and put all that out and stand there and make sure that the public don't come in, and difficult things. Like, I think around September, October, we have a big issue with suicides in Canberra. I don't know if it's a seasonal thing and what have you, coming out of winter. You would think people would be like, oh, now it's spring again, but it's a really bad time. And then, so going to like beautiful places where people have decided to end their lives, and you're just going, this is terrible. And so I moved on from there, and then I went into tactical intel, which was wonderful as well, and worked with the tactical team and travelled around with them and did all the intelligence for them, and that was incredible, just seeing the way they work. And it was just incredible. They are just the most dedicated group of people. It's really something to see them when they're it sounds so silly when they're kicking a door down or something, but it's just they are so disciplined, and it was a
highly
really
trained.
so highly trained, and so that was really good. And then I went to another area. It was called Protection Liaison, and so we worked with all the high office holders and special investigations and diplomatic liaison, and worked with high office holders, and I was up at Parliament House, and then it sort of got to the point where I thought, there's just, there was no love left for the job, and I think I was just going through the motions, and I left there in 2022. I finally resigned, and out there, it took a lot, and it was a lot of work with my psychologists and psychiatrists to just make sure I was doing the right thing, because it becomes such a huge identity. I got into volunteering as well, with Fearless Women, books and as well, which was just, and it was just that it helped me sort of get back into that sort of community service kind of thing, and it really lit that. I tried a few things. I was delivering library books to people at their homes, and volunteering in the food pantry at Gungahlin, which was just fabulous. But there are people shopping there that work in the public service, and what does that say to you about Canberra and the cost of living? That people they're in government jobs, and they need to be going to a food pantry, which I think is wonderful, because the food pantry, thankfully, Canberra's such a
safety net, right?
And we're such a high performing community in Canberra, and thankfully a lot of people feel that sort of guilt, so they donate a lot of things, which is really nice. So then there is, and then that's helped me with Fearless Women as well, to suggest to people that this place is here, and they'll pay a phone bill if you need, or emergency fuel, or emergency medications and things like that, they will cover. And then at Christmas they do hampers for kids and the families, and then they don't have to think about buying presents for the kids. And I just think it's just so wonderful, but it opens your eyes up to what we can do. And I think that's what spurred me on to study psychology. I want to be able to help and give back, but I can't even land on one thing on it, because I want to go to Bimbury and talk to the kids, and I really want to be a child psychologist, but I also want to be an organisational psychologist, because I want to stop places from being so, I want to have better workplaces for people and matching people to the right jobs.